Good morning, everyone. I hope this finds you well and living your best life in Jesus Christ. Well, I suppose that without realizing it, I have reached another milestone in my life as I proceed toward what I like to call old fogeyhood. I have reached the time in my life when more and more I find myself reminiscing about the past. It's a psychological condition I like to call the good old days syndrome. It started innocently enough. Who of us hasn't occasionally reminisced about how much simpler and better things were when we were younger, or how much better things used to be, or how the world has certainly changed for the worse? But lately, during our current coronavirus pandemic, I find myself, if I'm not careful, looking forward with a jaundiced eye and thinking how much worse things are today than they were a month ago, or a year ago, or 5 years ago, or a decade ago. And I suppose I'm not the only one who has this issue. Of late, I find more and more people writing and commenting about the current state of the state, the country, and the world, and bemoaning how bad things are and how much better things used to be. The problem with this is that it often infects our attitudes toward the church as well. I've heard the same things said about the current state of Christianity and how we need to go back to the good old days of the way things used to be. Well, guys, there's only two problems with that mindset. The first is that we've forgotten that the good old days weren't as good as we remember. Some of the same folks who like to opine on how great things were have forgotten the struggles that those who went before us went through and how difficult they had it back then. We tend to look at the past through rose-colored glasses and think that if we just went back the way things used to be, everything would be great. Well, let me remind you that no matter what you think, the good old days were just as difficult and fraught with problems as our current day. They were just different problems, and they handled them as they came up. The second thing is that when we look back, we can't really move ahead. Too many of us use our reminiscence about the good old days as an excuse to not try new things, both in and out of the church. The idea that we should be living in the past is the beginning of a death knell for any Christian or church. After all, remember Lot's wife? When we develop this critical, fearful spirit in our church, frankly, we're not helping. In Ezra chapter 3, we're told that Israel was rebuilding the temple after it had been destroyed by their enemies 70 years ago. And here's what it says. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the priests and Levites and the heads of fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation of this house being laid, though many shouted for joy, so that the people could not distinguish the sound of the joyful shout from the sound of the people's weeping, for the people shouted with great shout, and the sound was heard far away. That's Ezra 3:11. Think about it. Here they're finally rebuilding the temple after all of those years, and these old folks are looking in the past saying, oh, but it'll never be like it used to be. Look, do you long for the good old days? You look at young people today in our current society with video games and texting and social media and praise and worship music and large services with a whole bunch of young people, and you worry about the future of the church? Do you look at declining baptisms and, frankly, weak gospel meetings and overextended young families who don't have time for spiritual things and just want to throw up your hands? Well, I hate to tell you this, but you're not alone. I feel your frustration. I never dreamed when I was elected as our pastor a few months ago I would be called to hold services over the internet. And I, like you, long for a time when we can go back to normal. But I would caution you, as I caution myself. First of all, we must remember that our memories of yesteryear can be faulty. Not everything was wonderful back in the day. We tend to forget the bad stuff. But along with that, I want to tell you that the state of the church is not as bad as it may seem. Yes, there are different kinds of worship going on than we're used to. But the Church of God is moving forward into the new generation through it. Yes, things have changed, but praise the Lord, God is still in control and the gospel is still being preached. Yes, there's a cause for concern over our young people. But there's also a lot of extraordinary young Christians and young families out there. And what's their reaction when all they hear is how bad everything is today and how much better it used to be? What kind of message are we sending them? I mean, even if we're right in some respects about our assessment, how does our grumbling and complaining help them? It doesn't. Nor does it help the church to grow and thrive in difficult times. Let's do all we can to celebrate the good that our people of all ages are doing today for the Lord and, quote, reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching those who need it. We need to look ahead with hope. We need to celebrate our successes and not linger in the past. We need to embrace new ideas and different ways of teaching, preaching, and serving one another. Let's focus not on the hardships of today and long for the past, but let's look to our glorious future, which is guaranteed by Jesus Christ himself. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. I hope you make today a fantastic day. I want you to remember that I'm here if you need me, and I love you all.